Hello to everyone participating both virtually and in person, and congratulations to the organizers of the Creating Energy Conference for a very successful event. My name is Shannon Young. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability and External Affairs with Petronas Canada. Today I have the honor of introducing Chief Sharleen Gale of Fort Nelson First Nation as the speaker for the reconciliation session. Before I make the introduction, I would like to recognize that the Creating Energy Conference is being held on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Treaty 8 nations. We acknowledge the First Nations who have lived on and cared for these lands for generations. We make this acknowledgement as an act of gratitude to those whose lands we live and work on today. At Petronas Canada, we have personal and working relationships with many members of the Treaty 8 nations, and we understand the importance of Indigenous relations and collaboration. To quote my friend Dan George, reconciliation is a journey and not a destination. The road to reconciliation is a long and windy one, with many stops along the way, and we all have important roles to play. We're focused on listening and collaborating, and view reconciliation as crucial for fostering healthy and sustainable relationships with Indigenous peoples. No one is better suited to lead today's reconciliation session than Chief Gale. Chief Gale has been an elected councillor since 2019. As an active member and chief of the Fort Nelson First Nation, she understands how important it is for the spirit and intent of the treaty to be recognized. In this capacity, she asserts her people's rights to their land and takes responsibility for ensuring that future generations of First Nations are able to live their lives on their territory in a way that honors their ancestors, traditions, and way of life. Since beginning her career in the oil and gas sector in 2000, Chief Gale has held numerous roles, including in finance, maintenance, and leadership. His wealth of experience has provided outstanding familiarity with the oil and gas sectors in terms of operations, and also some of the challenges that we all face when navigating complex issues with multiple stakeholders. On behalf of Fort Nelson First Nation, Chief Gale has also focused on economic growth and economic diversification, including the Clark Lake Geothermal project. I've had the opportunity to participate in forums where Chief Gale has shared her vision for a society where Indigenous people are responsibly managing their own lands and building businesses and creating jobs in the process. Petronas Canada supports this vision. The path to meaningful reconciliation will only be successful by creating a balance between economic growth with meaningful Indigenous economic participation and mitigating environmental impacts in a manner that respects the land and the people who have lived on it for generations. Chief Gale is also the chair of the board of directors for the First Nations Major Project Coalition. In addition to creating opportunities for First Nations to hold equity in major project infrastructure, her work also highlights the need for First Nations to have access to financing for projects that are happening on their traditional lands. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce such an inspiring leader and a passionate advocate for truth and reconciliation. Please join me in welcoming Chief Sharleen Gale. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you here at your AGM. I think it's a really timely conversation to talk about making Indigenous reconciliation a reality. And I'd like to first recognize that I'm on the unceded territory of the Treaty 8 nations. My home community of Fort Nelson First Nation is part of Treaty 8. And some of you may or may not know that Treaty 8 is a peace and friendship treaty, and it's not a cede and surrender treaty. We'll continue to be stewards of our land on behalf of our people for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the river flows. And, that is something that we hold near and dear to our heart. And if you live in our region, I'm pretty sure that you've heard that before. As Skylar said, my name's Sharleen Gale. I'm the chief of the Fort Nelson First Nation in Treaty 8 territory. And I also have the privilege of serving as the chair of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, in which that capacity I'll be speaking to you today. Some of you may have been at the BC AGM in Prince George, where they're celebrating their 70th anniversary. Well, I had opportunity to speak there. So some of you may have heard some of these same messages today, but I think they are messages worth repeating. So first off, I'd like to thank Cheryl and the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and everyone working behind the scenes, because I know it takes a lot of work to put one of these conferences together, whether people are in person or virtually. And I just want us to think about what kind of future do we want to create for our children and our children's children, because you all know when First Nation people make decisions, we make decisions for 7 generations. And we know that we all are going to be living in the region together. So when we speak of our children, we think of yours too. I expect for most of us in this room, we want a healthy environment. We want a strong economy and a province where everyone, regardless of your gender, your age, your religion, you know, whoever you want to be, can reach their full potential. So the question is how do we do that? What are the steps and what needs to happen? So I've been asked to talk about the role that reconciliation plays in creating a brighter future, because relates to economic growth and environmental protection, and to exclusivity of helping communities flourish everywhere. But also requires thinking differently and acting differently. So at the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, we've been doing things a little differently for a few years now. And we rewritten some of the old playbooks of how Indigenous people are supposed to be involved in projects. And we're also developing a new model for reconciliation, especially on the economic side. And I'm excited to share that with you, some of the work that we've been doing up to date. So for some of you that aren't familiar with our organization, the First Nation Major Projects Coalition is an initiative that started with 11 nations, and it now has over 85 nations in 7 provinces and territories. We are currently working on a project portfolio worth over 17 billion, and all of those projects involve an equity position for the First Nation partner. Our main goal is to enhance the economic well-being of our members by supporting them to make informed business decisions in major resource and infrastructure projects. And our support has helped to establish 2 major equity precedents. The coalition has brought thought leaders and a facilitator of Indigenous leadership, government, and the private sector on matters of mutual business interest. And we've been able to achieve this by having a very dedicated and engaged National First Nation membership. We're coast to coast, a board of directors that has a very clear vision, and a very high-performing operations team. They just seem to never stop, I tell you. And we also got strong support from the Government of Canada to implement our mandate, our vision, and our goals. One of the biggest deals that we worked really hard on was a 10% equity in the Coastal GasLink pipeline that was announced in last March. The signing of the equity option marks the first time for our members that an opportunity was negotiated to allow them to become owners in infrastructure that is crossing their territories. So there's a good sense of pride that comes with that ownership. And it's really lift up the levels in the playing field, and has put, you know, First Nations at advantage for the first time. But I feel that, you know, with this deal with the Coastal GasLink, it represents an economic reconciliation and an acknowledgement of the rights and title of the underlying resource. That's something that we have to start thinking about moving forward. But during this transaction, both sides had a lot to learn over the 2 years of negotiations, and there were a lot of hard days. We had a hard time accessing capital, and right now it's just an option for 10%, and we're still working on the financing. And we had an option to acquire additional 10%, but we had to give that up because we weren't able to secure the financing in the short time that we were given. With the negotiations, we always didn't see eye to eye with TC Energy. We have a good relationship and we have trust, but there were a lot of times that we were butting heads at the negotiation table, and these are hard negotiations. And with that, of course, the First Nations didn't always see eye to eye either. So there's always a difference of opinion out there. an appetite for risk and acceptable conditions. And some people just don't want to own a pipeline. But we were able to work together and develop a limited partnership with 12 of our members in the end. And we're really proud of that work. These lessons will be carried forward with us to our next deal so that our members can learn about these transactions as we move forward and as they get into their own. And it's a strong sign that First Nations can, with the proper advice and support, achieve meaningful participation in major projects. I also want to talk about some work that's taking place in Ontario. And the reason why I think it's relevant to this audience in BC is for the past 2 years, the coalition has been working to support our members in Southwestern Ontario with an equity negotiation involving Hydro One. And Hydro One will be investing $1 billion in transmission infrastructure within our members' territories over the next 5 years. Through the technical support provided by the coalition to our members, we worked collaboratively with Hydro One to establish a historic precedence of 50% equity participation by the First Nations in transmission projects moving forward. So that's pretty huge. I mean, equity and having Indigenous participation in any projects moving forward, I think that's where we need to go. And if we want to build a good country and projects on time, we're going to have to start thinking like that. Hydro One was motivated to do this because they recognized they had an obligation to make a meaningful impact towards economic reconciliation. And by working together, we have set the bar high for other utilities, including BC Hydro, to follow. In comparison, when I look around what's happening in BC, I see commitments by the provincial government, to lofty goals, to undertaking lengthy processes, but with very little concrete action towards supporting First Nations' ability to partner on major projects as a key part of achieving economic reconciliation. If we continue with the status quo, I see so many missed opportunities. I see capital flight. I see lagging on meetings on our next net zero targets, when we should be leading this transition and jurisdiction in Canada. And I think this all could be fixed if we take the right action. We need a government-backed program that enables First Nations affordable access to capital to partner with the private sector on natural resource infrastructure projects. And these programs now exist in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. And we've seen the success that other nations are having by having these, affordable access to capital. We need regulatory systems that fast-track projects where full partners with First Nations exist. And full partnership means a co-design project plan. Don't come with us with your preconceived plans. Allow us to build the project with you. Mitigation on environmental impacts, board representatives, representation, and meaningful economic participation, such as equity. And we need government to make meaningful investments in the capacity and business readiness of First Nations to engage in project opportunities at the speed of business. By taking these steps, I think we'll be creating a place where business is incentivized to automatically seek partnerships with Indigenous communities, increase investors' confidence by achieving net zero consent through partnership. This can boost your ESG investment ratings on projects in BC, provide tangible examples how the principles of free, prior, and informed consent can work to the benefit of both First Nations and the private sector, and build the kind of wealth transfer to First Nations that no other government programs or payments could ever match. I do want to take this opportunity to commend the Government of Canada for taking concrete actions in the Budget 2022 to fund the development of the National Benefit Sharing Framework. It is through this framework that the Coalition hopes to see the establishment of a national program that enables Indigenous groups access to capital at competitive rates for partnerships in major infrastructure and natural resource projects. We are getting to a place where we no longer have to view projects operating in our territories as outside our influence and participation. That's really something that's new for First Nations, and it means that we can share in the long-term financial benefits of major projects. I want to touch base on reconciliation and Indigenous rights more specifically because I know it's a hot topic in this province. And I think that we need to have more discussion on this and come to some mutual understanding. So there has been a lot of fear of UNDRIP, and the action plan. And if you're worried about how government legislation would impact your business, your family, your community, then let me tell you, as a First Nation person, I can relate. We've had to deal with the consequences of government legislation that was totally contrary to our interests for over a century. I know the term free, prior, and informed consent that I mentioned a moment ago can cause stress in the investment community, and that there's some legal, concerns that, create risk. And I understand that. But I also ask you to look at it from a perspective of First Nations. We all know in this room that Indigenous rights were trampled on for many, many decades, and we have been totally ignored, and that we never benefited from resources from our own traditional lands. For us, requiring free, prior, and informed consents means that we no longer can allow this to happen. It guarantees that we'll be a part of the process when it comes to developing the resources in our territory. But in order for us as First Nations in the private sector to be truly successful operating in this new era, we need the kind of public policy change and supports from government that I described earlier to take effect. We want a healthy, competitive resource industry in BC. We're on the same side as you guys, but Indigenous people need to be a part of it. We can't be looking out on the outside looking in. And, that's what reconciliation means for me. The bills, the declarations, and action plans are just the first step. We need to go beyond the symbolic actions and really address the practical challenges that Indigenous people are facing. What are we looking for is an impact at the end of the day. Do these documents create more opportunity for our nations? Do they build prosperity for our people? Or do they help our members enjoy great housing, healthcare, and access to our lands and culture? That's where the First Nation Major Project has been focused, on creating economic opportunities that support the self-determination of our members. And that's where the Chamber and its members really have an important role to play. There's so much we can do, and many of you are already doing it to help move the barriers that have been put in front of our people for decades. I spoke about the CGL and the Hydro One, and about how getting equity options was a big win for us. But you don't have to be a billion-dollar company to be effective at reconciliation. Some of the things that I've seen work with the private sector that is really contributing to reconciliation include procurement policies and benefits procurement policies that benefit Indigenous businesses, hiring policies that attract and retain Indigenous people and lead to a representative workforce, engagement strategies that treat First Nations as partners and connect with us early in on a project rather than treating us like a burden or a box to check, and opportunities for joint ventures and limited partnerships where we can combine our strengths. In many cases, you've seen deep sector expertise and access to financing. We can bring access to labor and, environmental knowledge. And I think these are, all the right things to do. But they're also the smart things to do, because, if we're all in this together and you want us to create value for your business, then we have to become more competitive, and we need to win and work together to get some of the contracts that are happening in the territory and also gain more clients. And that's a switch in the mindset that we all need to make, from considering Indigenous engagement at a cost and a hurdle to be overcome to thinking it as an opportunity. I also recognize that reconciliation, if it's to be sustainable and effective, is a two-way street. I can assure you members of the coalition are doing their part to improve their business readiness and create opportunities for their people. And that means being a good business partner, practicing good governance, investing in training for our people, and advocating for government policies that support economic development. We are putting in the work, and I'm not asking you to do anything in the name of reconciliation that I'm not willing to do myself. I'm asking for the business community to work with First Nations and to work with the coalition so that we can create a brighter future, a prosperous future for everyone in this province. And before I wrap up, I just want to touch base on the energy transition in the coalition and the Indigenous, the way Indigenous people play a role in it, because that's a big part of the reconciliation as well. All of us want to see a healthy environment and respect for the land to ensure that people and the animals and all living things can thrive. And when I look at the energy innovation that is happening across the province and the country, including LNG, hydrocarbon, carbon capture, geothermal, biomass, and battery storage, I see Indigenous people at the forefront. I think the transition and the investment it will require is a generational opportunity for our communities. Many of us want to be involved in these projects, not only to get to net zero, but because when they're done right, they're also a way to alleviate the poverty in our communities. If industry and First Nations and government can work constructively together, then there is a growing list of examples showing that we can, then I think we are positioned to supply energy in the most environmentally, socially responsible way possible. And a lot of First Nations want to be a part of that. And it can make this province very prosperous while also addressing the big global challenge of having affordable but clean energy for everyone. No one said it's going to be easy, but we are moving the needle on the energy transition, on reconciliation, and on inclusion. And the more we can do this together, the more we'll have partnerships where we're listening to each other and we have the opportunity to go forward further. So I'm excited to get there, and I know there will be some questions which I'm happy to answer. And I'd just like to say thank you and Masi Cho.
Thank you so much, Chief Gale. I've had the great fortune of hearing you speak a couple of times just in the last couple of weeks, and your words are heartfelt and profound moving forward, both for your nation and for all nations, and working towards reconciliation, working forward for economic sustainability, with joint venture partners and all kinds of projects. So you have so much to bring to this conversation, and I appreciate the time you've taken out of your busy schedule to be here. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing what you're doing again with Fort Nelson First Nation and with the Major Projects Coalition that you're leading now as well. So many opportunities there. So thank you for being here. We're going to carry on a conversation here. I'd like to bring in and introduce at this time Julie Ziebart, who's going to carry on this conversation with you. Julie is a member of MNP's Fort St. John team, and Julie's been helping with, she helps with small and medium-sized enterprises in a variety of industries, including oil and gas services, and improve their growth for business for more than 2 decades. She's been doing this. Among the clients she serves, Julie works closely with Indigenous businesses and communities. Though her understanding of Indigenous clients is unique and knows Indigenous clients' unique needs, she offers customized insights and solutions to help them achieve their objectives. Julie has a very personal relationship as well as past president of the Fort St. John and District Chamber of Commerce, and currently serves as first vice with the BC Chamber of Commerce. So please welcome Julie Ziebart to carry on another conversation with you.
Thanks, Cheryl. It looks like we have just over 25 minutes together, Chief Gale. So thank you so much for the opportunity to ask some questions, and Cheryl will be checking with the Q&A from anyone from the audience, but I did prepare some questions for you. A lot has been covered in your presentation, but maybe some further insights, I will appreciate them, especially because we're talking about Fort Nelson First Nations and the Peace region and the Northern Rockies, and those projects are especially close to my heart. So thanks. I'll just jump into this. 2 years ago, Chief Gale, in 2020, media was reporting that Fort Nelson First Nations was looking to harness energy from the Earth's core. So this was, very new technology, and great to hear from our part of the province. And you saw the Clark Lake Geothermal Initiative as your First Nations' only sustainable path to a long-term energy transition at the time. And today, Tudeka, I hope I'm saying that right, the geothermal project is very real and is poised to be the poster child for the energy transition. And you must have been so proud to see that name and logo up on the drill rig. I saw that picture last fall. and that's great. Can you share a few key lessons and insights that you and your nation have learned throughout this process?
Yeah, so obviously this is a very new technology in Canada, and this project brings us so much pride because it'll be 100% owned by the Fort Nelson First Nation, generating 7 to 15 kilowatts of power. Right now we're on gas-fired energy through the Fort Nelson gas plant, so there is a huge need. We're not connected to the BC Hydro Site C grid. So this is a tremendous opportunity to show how we can revolutionize the North. We have restored old depleted gas well and transformed it, the site, into this geothermal facility, which our third drill test will come in the first week of July. So we're very excited to showcase that and invite our neighbors in to be a part of the learnings. You asked about a few key lessons and insights learned throughout the process. So I think it's just really important for people to know that we are in an energy transition, and this is not going to happen overnight. We're not going to replace oil and gas or anything else, at the speed of light. This is something, with the geothermal we had been talking about since 2017, as a concept. And it was through conversations like this at a conference where a light bulb had gone off, and more opportunities were coming. We went through a pandemic, and then the narrative changed about talking about net zero by 2050, and there was more opportunities for grants, and it just was the right time, let's just say, in the right place, because over the 50 years of operating that pipeline, when people used to walk around the area, the snow was melted. And so they knew that whatever was coming out of the ground was really hot and the temperatures were hot. So the potential is really, really good. And I just have to say that this kind of work takes huge expertise. This is something that we don't have in our own community to provide the capacity to do when it comes to the engineering and the building of the infrastructure. So one of the things that we have been doing is reaching out to other people that are involved in geothermal in other countries to learn about different practices. The Maori came and shared their experience, that if they know now what they would have changed in their design 30 years ago. So that was very helpful about what the other opportunities can come of. But one thing that I do find very challenging as we go forward is the different policies that are in place that, really defeat the purpose of Indigenous reconciliation. We're going to have to be able to sell our power to the grid. And, there's going to be challenges and policies that need to be changed in the future, because I don't think that First Nations should be affected by different policies like no EPAs. We should be able to sell our power to whoever we want. There's a transmission line that goes to Alberta. We transfer power back and forth depending on what's happening in the region at the time. Mm-hmm. But one of the key lessons is, we don't have the capacity within our nation. So being involved with the First Nation Major Projects Coalition has been very helpful. They've been able to get us access to expertise, advice across this country, around the globe. And that has really helped create a lot of insight about what we need to do with this project and what the opportunities really are. We know food security is going to be a huge challenge into the future. And with the potential and the ownership of the heat rights, we're going to be able to create about 100 greenhouses. Food just went up 9%. Gas, we're paying, a tremendous amount. You suffer when you get to the pump. But I just think that it's great that our people have come together. I mean, they have a strong vision for this project to succeed. And I think it will really bring so much prosperity and knowledge and good jobs to future generations as we move forward.
Right. And I did see that this is a great way to invite your community members back to the nation and come home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this isn't the only project that we're working on. We know that we need to revitalize the economy in the Fort Nelson territory. And if I have it the way I would like it, I would like the Fort Nelson to be an economic powerhouse. I think partnering with First Nations is key. And, if you want a long-term prosperous project, that you can work with the people when there's emergency situations, or worked with the people when there's challenges and have real talk, and come and find solutions. I think this is key on moving projects forward. And I've seen good partners come and approach Fort Nelson, and I've seen bad partners come and approach Fort Nelson. So we need to ensure, like, whatever we get involved with, that we're not putting our community at risk. For an example, last April, we just announced that we're exploring a hydrogen plant. You probably already aware that we're trying to open up a pellet plant with Peak Renewables. And through the waste materials that is going to come from that, we want to see if we can produce bright green hydrogen. And that's all a study that is happening. And hopefully, we'll be able to succeed on these 3 renewable projects in the region. And, we'll be one of those studies where, this can be done, and First Nation people are good partners. So I'm looking forward to what the future brings, and we're just going to keep striving to make these projects successful.
Yes, great. And so you have, I think earlier you were mentioning you're traveling here, there. Your message is very valuable, and a lot of people and organizations are wanting to hear your insights. And so I did see that you were part of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources as a witness last month. And your opening statement really stood out for me as part of that committee's study of fair and equitable Canadian energy transformation. And specifically, it was a fair and just transition for First Nations recognizes that we are starting from a significant deficit in terms of both employment and education skills development. And, that really sits with me. So what strategic initiatives would you like to see implemented in First Nations communities like your own that would have that significant impact on improving the business readiness and capacity to ensure that everyone is able to take part in those opportunities within their territories?
Well, I believe that Indigenous nations are ready to step up and help the business community, help Canada on a strong economic path that we all can be proud of. But we can't wait until projects are built in our territories to become involved. We have to become involved at day one. I think it's a sign of respect when you do come, because we'll be able to address these kind of things, the training, the rates of unemployment, the lack of education, and talk about what are the opportunities, how do we get more involved. In my own community of Fort Nelson First Nation, we have an aging workforce. We have the baby boomers retiring, and there's no one to fill their shoes. My dad, he worked in the forestry industry in Fort St. John, lived here his whole life, worked for Canfor and many of the other outfits here, and he just retired. So that's a wealth of information that is leaving the workforce and the mentorship that goes with that. When I look at, the growing population of First Nation communities, we're growing at 4 times the rate than other segments of Canadian population. And some reports are saying that we need to do something now. Like, I don't want to wait for projects to be built or proposed in a territory to start looking at these challenges. I think this is something that needs to happen now, especially in the province of BC. We have a wealth of, like I said, wealth of information leaving these facilities. And I'm proud to say that with the projects that we're working on, we're doing a lot of exploratory skills training, and we're setting up our members from right from the high school all the way to if you're 65 or you still want to work past that, you're more than welcome to take some training. And it's an 8-week program that shows you how to do carpentry, how to do plumbing, how to do welding, millwrighting. And after the 8-week program, you can decide how you want to be involved in the trades market or trades training. So many of our communities continue to struggle with issues like overcrowding, moldy houses, no meaningful employment opportunities, lack of access to quality education, and all of these things, they create barriers for our people, and they create barriers for society. It creates a barrier for us to participate in the Canadian economic mainstream. And in a lot of respect, I think the root of these barriers is a ongoing impact of colonization, which has, just positioned our people to be successful. It removed us off our lands and our territories, and it has kept our people down for generations. I want to focus on more of a positive path forward, on the opportunities, especially opportunities that, move us towards this net zero, move us to more clean energy projects where our communities can have equity ownership in them. And I believe that this net zero transition is one of the greatest economic opportunities of this generation. And we want to be a part of it. We want to lead it. We don't want to be left behind. We can no longer be placed and pushed to the side while we watch your communities grow. We need to grow along with the rest of the region.
Mm-hmm. So this wasn't on the list, but I am curious, how successful have you been with influencing the local colleges in providing that pathway to education for your members?
Well, I'm proud to say that, the Northern Lights College is doing a great job. They're calling in all the leadership to really talk about these issues, and that's something that we need to do. They're trying to set up a Indigenous Excellence Center for Education. And I think they're doing it right by calling us in, bringing in the capacity of our people that are doing this work in our communities, and creating this dialogue that I see is only going to grow further. One of the things that I think that needs to happen in the province is, our kids need more opportunities within the high school. We need to be able to introduce them into these trade opportunities into the high school. What opportunities are there to become a professor and, move back to your community and maybe provide expertise that way. But, even with the NINA's office, they do tremendous work for our community. But again, it's the policies and the restrictions for people to be able to actually apply for the funding that is the challenge. Personally, through the Fort Nelson First Nations, we just approved our budgets, and we have to pump in like up to $500,000 to $1 million each year so that we can meet the needs of our education. Most of you probably don't know that the Fort Nelson First Nation has their own school. And we have our own daycare at 6 months all the way to grade 12. Our school is part of the School District 81. We just celebrated 40 years of success in education. And education is key to our people. And it's so, so important. But yes, I have to say, partnerships like the Northern Lights College with NINA's, and other like-minded people, it's been going really good. And the conversation is going to where it needs to be with First Nations, participating in creating an Indigenous lens and space.
I have to say, I know the Challow School is a very well sought after, even with people living within Fort Nelson, the township. So kudos to your nation on that.
Thank you.
I do have one last question. I read a lot, Cheryl knows that, but earlier this year, Castle's one of the largest business law practices in Canada. They released a white paper towards an Indigenous approach to ESG and climate action change. And what I noted that was in that paper was their comment about a successful ESG program should meaningfully recognize Indigenous rights and traditional knowledge to define what constitutes sustainable development, considering globally recognized standards such as UNDRIP, and support Indigenous-led projects and Indigenous equity ownership. And of course, we talk with a lot of businesses and advise a lot of businesses and BC Chamber members. A lot of them are in responsible resource development in mind. So what insights can you share for business leaders in these companies who are embarking on developing their own ESG strategy, but are worried that UNDRIP will sow that uncertainty and deter investment?
Well, I think these potential fears regarding UNDRIP are becoming quickly outdated.
Mm-hmm.
As many companies are realizing that working with First Nations is definitely key. We are good partners. I think that any company that is implementing UNDRIP should really look at their ESG, their environmental social governance approach. It's a good business practice. And in today's economy in Canada, it is definitely the way to go to add the I in ESG. Indigenous communities have the rights and interests that must be respected. And I think that companies can address their UNDRIP commitments through ESG strategy and get them on a better path to being able to build projects and, develop projects on Indigenous lands. I think that when a company partners with First Nation, that's the truest form of consent. They can plan out the project together. First Nation's been here for thousands of years. We know where things can and can't go. I spent a tremendous amount of time in court in my younger chief years and counselor years. And that's not where we want to be. We want to work alongside with industry. We want to work alongside with governments. And when I get something at my table and it says, okay, we're going to build a pipeline through a moose calving ground and mineral lick, we got to kind of talk about these things so that we can develop the project in a better way so everyone's successful. And I have to say that I was really proud at that time because Fort Nelson First Nation was never just saying no. We were always trying to find a solution. But we're also aware of the lack of conversation that is happening between Indigenous people and the banking sector. And I think that needs to change because in the media, all you hear about is the bad stories about working with First Nation people, and I know some media outlets are really trying to change that, but there's some really good stories out there. And I'm happy you read about the 2-day Ka one, right? So, I mean, those are kind of the stories that need to happen, like the CGL, the Hydro One. I mean, these projects are happening through Indigenous partnerships. We had a conference last April. It was NetZero by 2050. We had over 1,300 delegates attend. And there were a number of industry types who, were just blown away at the forward thinking of our members. We have 85 members. We're growing quickly because we don't advertise. It's just by word of mouth through the communities. But the community has definitely, the communities have definitely said that they're interested in the economic reconciliation that is happening in their territories, and they want to do more of it. They know that they have an important role to play. And I know that the First Nation Major Project has an important role in hosting this dialogue. And, in the future, I hope that, companies really think about what we're saying and what we're talking about today and work towards true Indigenous partnerships with, the Treaty 8 communities in the territory. A lot of resources have left our territories. I mean, we've had a lot of impacts that have happened to the land. We can't deny that. I mean, the Blueberry River court case has definitely showed that we were ignored as Indigenous communities. And, I think that in the future, it's all about sitting down and having those difficult conversations, providing solid advice. Obviously, we're always advocating to do the right thing for 7 generations. I think that the more that we do economic reconciliation, the better that we'll all be able to participate in a meaningful way. Indigenous communities offer solid partnerships with the private sector. Is the private sector in Fort St. John prepared to do that? I think some people are in denial, and we need to get over those thought processes, right? But as I mentioned earlier, in adding the I in ESG could really boost your ratings and help you de-risk investment. I think this is a big deal for corporate Canada, as it is for our communities and indeed all Canadians. I think at the end of the day, like if we just work together, structuring deals differently and looking at credit enhancements and other innovative ways to run this country better and, you know, the region better, then we're all going to, you know, see the benefit at the end of the day. As a land user, I'm so big on being able to hunt and fish and gather medicines and pass that on to the 7 generations. So when I get involved in business, or when the Fort Nelson First Nation gets involved in business, it's about economic prosperity and environmental stewardship, and doing it in a way that, you know, protects our livelihood, protects our values. You talked about the 2-day ka, you know, that was called the Clark Lake Geothermal. And by, you know, taking ownership of that, our people were able to embrace the project and put our values into it, our culture and our language. And 2-day ka means steam water in Dene. And, you know, that name came from one of a very talented artists in our community. And what pride is that, you know? Mm-hmm. So I just think that the business community, you know, the more they work with First Nations and have those hard conversations, it's going to be easier moving forward. And you'll get further, and you'll get further faster by involving us, because the net zero transition is going to require many, many critical minerals, and all those minerals you're going to have to cross Indigenous communities to have access to. And I think we're just to the point as Indigenous people, after the finding of the 250 children, you know, governments adopting UpDrip, you know, companies embracing Section 92. You know, we need to do this work, and we need to do it together. And the more we collaborate and have difficult conversations, the more we're going to see success. And the last thing I want to see is these opportunities be pulled from under our feet because we can't get it together and other countries are beating us to the chase.
Exactly. So my takeaway from this conversation is really the importance of conversation, good or bad or difficult. In these last few minutes that we have together, being invited to the table as First Nations into these conversations and decision making is especially important. But what can you share with the chamber members that are really wanting to transition to clean energy alongside First Nations communities, but are unsure of how to be invited to your table? Oh, yeah, I think it's my internet. I'm not sure, but with some members of the, you know, chamber members or business owners, how do you have some advice on how they can be invited to your table to start those conversations?
Well, I'll tell you, I got a phone call from, you know, one of the people from the town office, and just said, you know, this might be a weird question. There's somebody that wants to meet you and meet your nation. Are you willing to have a coffee? And I'm like, yeah, well, tell them to meet me, you know, at this location on this date. And yeah, we'll have a conversation. And look what that turned out to be. Like it's, you know, a partnership to open up a pellet plant, which can bring, you know, over 400 jobs into the facility and to the region, you know, with the processing, the logs and whatnot. But also we have a lot of treaty days. You know, Doig just had their days. You know, we just had Indigenous Day. There's opportunities to get out there and just learn who the communities are. Go talk to the elders. I mean, Cheryl, I've met Cheryl a while ago, and, you know, we just see each other and just say hi. I mean, that it's simple as that. You know, you might want to call the economic development officer and say, you know, I have these services and I do this kind of business, and just wanted to see if, you know, we can work together. You know, the answer, you might be surprised what the answer might be. You know, if you give an opportunity to a nation, I bet you those opportunities will come back to you tenfold.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me and with our team today. Cheryl, I will take it back to you. And it's nice to see you again, Chief Gale.
Thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure to hang out. Hopefully we can do this in person, and I get to meet a lot of people on the floor in the business community. I really look forward to that. we have a lot to offer in Treaty 8 territory. And, you know, historically, it always hasn't been good. But look at it as an opportunity. Look at UNDRIP as an opportunity. And let's get some really good work done where we're all included in this.
Thank you so much, Chief Gale. And yes, we do cross paths frequently now, so I really appreciate that. And you touched on not everything is a major project. It's just about connecting and having those conversations. And Julie reiterated that and how important it is. And we are going to have a panel tomorrow that talks about not major project, but talks about community engagement with different nations through the chambers, through small business. So that's a good lead segue into that. So thank you. I want to, again, thank you for making the time. I know how busy your schedule is. And Julie is going to be back with our next session, which is growing the energy sector through Indigenous equity, inclusion, and partnerships. And we have some great speakers on that panel. So Julie will be back in a few minutes, and just grab a cup of coffee and we'll be right back. Thank you again, Chief Gale.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Bye now.
Thank you.